While we're waiting on that to dry, we can move on and put in an underlying wash in the foreground. Now, it's quite a big, wide, expansive foreground. So we're going to need to mix a very light green first of all. So I'm coming into this tray with water and using Windsor yellow with a touch of Windsor blue. Now, a very little Windsor blue will give you a nice, bright, sunlit yellow, yellowish green, and I'm going to put that on to the foreground. There we are. Sweeping it on, cutting around the roots of the tree, and pulling the brush roughly across the paper, putting on lots and lots of wash along the bottom of the wall. Now, if we bring the green up over the wall, for instance, we can't retain the white of the paper to give us that lovely bright colour that we need in the brickwork. Putting this on really quickly. Add some water to the mix. And we just mix up a thicker blend of the three colours, Windsor yellow, Windsor blue, and light red. And I'm pulling that across the foreground. We can throw some shafts of colour in there as well, just to vary the colour of the foreground, because there's nothing worse than a big expansive foreground in a painting and it all the same colour. Changing the colour again slightly, I'm adding some more yellow. Don't worry about the white flecks, because they actually add interest to the foreground. Bit more yellow into this area. And pull that across. Now, if you want to darken some areas within that, I just have to go into the Windsor blue again, adding some light red, and a little bit of Windsor yellow, and we can put some really dark bits in there. Look at that. Isn't that fantastic, to give you those clumps of grass and dark shadows that are running through the foreground? And that will lighten quite a lot. You don't have to worry too much about it being too dark, because it will dry 50% lighter. And there's some more clumps of grass over in this area. There we are. Look at the texture that that's putting in. Now, just cleaning off the brush, and we can soften that out. We still have the effect of sunlight on the grass, but we now have given a lot of interest and texture into that by putting in the dark colours, just blending it through. That's all we have to do. We can put some figuring in that whenever it's dry. Now, the sky should be dry by now, so I'm just going to test that with the back of my hand. Yes, quite dry. So I can move up and start to work on the pan tiles on the roof. And what a lovely colour we have on the roofs with those pan tiles. So I'm going to use light red and crimson to give me a nice sunlit red, going across to the crimson. And you get a colour called cadmium red. I don't have it in the palette, but I find that if you mix light red and crimson, you can get cadmium red. Now, thinning that down slightly, I want to go back up now and put some tiles on the roof, starting just below the ridge tile. And we pull across just to get that area pretty straight, watching not to put your hand into the wet paint. Now, we must paint the roof in downward strokes in the direction of the fall. Now, you can see I'm leaving some white flecks on the tile, because if light bounces off the tile on the roof, then we're going to get flashes of light. So don't be tempted to cover it all in. And straight lines aren't really important, because you'll find that whenever you look at the roof, that the lines aren't exactly straight. A bit of rickety movement in the roof is a good thing to have, because it shows that the weathering and age of the roof that is there. And it actually adds to it gives you more character in the painting itself. Now, filling that in using the number 8 round brush in the direction of the fall of the roof, cutting around the corners of the other wall. We can put some texture and detail on this roof as we progress, but this is blocking in the main colour. Now, you'll find on a roof sometimes, with years of weathering, you're going to have algae growing on the tiles. So how we show that is by going straight into the Windsor yellow and onto the tray, and I'm adding some green from the foreground grass into that, and I'm just going to feed that into the drying wash. And you can see if I push that up into the roof, it gives the effect of algae growing on the tiles themselves. Now, if the underlying wash is wet, that's going to bleed in. Just a little bit more algae there. There we are. It just gives a nice effect of greenery on the surface of the tiles. Now, while that's drying, we can move along to this little shed here, which I find is a fantastic effect today because of the way the light is hitting the gable end wall. This is in shadow, and this is in direct sunlight, and it has great impact. So we're using the same colour as before, the light red and crimson, to give me that purplish, or the reddish colour on the tile roof. Coming along the bottom of the ridge tile. Just leave the ridge tile for now, because we don't want to touch this wet wash above the roof. I'm pulling the brush down in the direction of the fall, leaving some white flecks. Loading the brush again, a bit more water just to thin that down. Finding the top and pulling the brush down in the direction of the fall. Again, as we come towards the bottom, we can leave a jagged edge to feed in some of the algae colour. Going back into the green that we mixed with the Windsor yellow and Windsor blue. Just strengthen that up slightly, and we can feed that in along the bottom of the tiled roof. That's the line, and then spread it into the roof. Let it grow. You can see the algae is growing up the tiles. Now, we just have to use the same technique to block in the other roofs of the building, because they're all going to be the same colour. We'll put some shadows on them later to show that there is a shadowed side and a sunlit side. So I'll continue to block that in with the same technique. Well, that's the underlying wash on all of the roofs. But you can see that the roofs look all the one colour. Now, with the sun coming in from top right, that means that some of the roofs are going to be in shadow, those roofs that are facing away from the source of light. So let's have a look at a photograph that I took earlier. Now, you can see from the photograph that the roof of the little shed is in shadow, and it's a lot darker than the roof that's directly above it and in direct sunlight. Now, the roof of the main house is in shadow as well, in contrast to the light part of the roof that is facing the sun. So how do we show that? Well, if we move up to the top right-hand side of the paper, you can see that I have a colour similar to the roof colour. The colour I'm going to mix is ultramarine, that's the blue colour, and light red in a very, very dilute mix. Now this is going to give me a very purplish blue wash to put over the roof tile colour. Now we can come up and put a little bit of that over the test piece first of all, and there you can see that we are showing shadow on the tile colour. It's always a good idea to practice on a wee piece of rough paper to the side so that you're sure your wash is going to work before you apply it to the main painting. So let's move across now and fill in some of the shadowed areas. We'll start here on the main house and working again in the direction of the fall of the roof. Now the colour that is underlying is going to shine through and influence the colour of this wash. back into the paint again, and we can put on the little shed roof. Now I'm coming across the ridge tile this time because we don't have to worry about a wet wash above. And pulling down in the direction of the fall, we can leave some influence of light red just to show that there is a variation in tone on the roof. More paint. Keep your brush pretty wet and cover the whole area. But it's better always to work in the direction of the fall. Now, if I use the same color and move to the roof above the little shed, this one is in shadow as well, so I'm finding the ridge tile and coming in the direction of the fall, cutting around this sunlit roof. And along the bottom of the chimney there, we have a bit of lead flashing. Now, it will show up as a grey against the red, so we have left the white of the lead flashing. Then when we cover it with the shadow colour, it shines up as grey. So we don't need to mix another colour for that. Pulling this right across to the chimney and showing the direction of the fall of the roof. Cutting around the walls so that we have nice sharp contrasts in colour. There we are. Now I'm looking at this roof over here, and there's a shadow cast on that roof of a building that is outside the painting altogether. So using the same colour, I'm going to put in a chimney pot, the top of a chimney, and a roof. And that's falling down towards the stone. Filling the brush again, loading it with water, and we just block in that area. Now, it's always a good idea to put in shadows from outside the painting if they're there, because it shows that this house is not isolated on its own, that there are other buildings in the vicinity that are influencing the painting for us. Now we just let that dry, and we can continue then to work on the walls of the building.
Now available to buy. Try these techniques at home whenever you wish. The extended DVD of today's workshop is now available from the Painting and Drawing channel. For further information and to order your copy, go to www.paintingdrawingchannel.com.